An ice cream company was ordered to surrender $23.785 million in profit because its packaging looked a little too much like another ice cream brand. The most interesting difference wasn't the pastel containers with black cursive lettering. So let's get into it. Van Leeuwen came to court with years of research, rejected concepts, and design iterations, whereas Rebel had the finished product and almost no evidence showing how it got there. So one company could prove its brand had a past, had some thought behind it, and the other could only present a suspiciously familiar present. And in the age of AI, this raises a much bigger question. When anyone can generate polished work instantly, how do you prove the thinking is actually yours? So by the end of this video, I'll give you a 4-part thinking trail for making your human judgment visible in AI-assisted work. Back to the ice. Lewin's recognizable trade dress combined monochromatic pastel packaging, black script, and a minimalist design. Rebel's packaging was remarkably similar. The case wasn't about whether Van Leeuwen owned pastel colors or cursive lettering individually. It was about the overall impression those elements created together. And Rebel's Harvard Business School educated founder, who claimed he never Googled ice cream while developing a nationally distributed ice cream brand, which is interesting, right? So you knew enough to understand the gap in the market, but you didn't know enough to know that other ice cream brands use this packaging. Okay. And to add insult to injury, Rebel had no saved sketches, no mock-ups, no earlier versions of their work. So there was no evidence that said, hey, we've been thinking about this, right? And when Rebel started going to market, a Wegmans buyer warned the founder about the resemblance before they launched, and he still decided to change nothing. So the judge found the design explanation clearly fabricated because someone told you about it. You have access to Google. So because of that, Rebel was ordered to surrender 23.785, approximately $24 million in profits, and they have to redesign the packaging. It's currently being appealed, but we'll see what happens. The problem wasn't simply that the products looked alike. The problem was Rebel could not provide a credible explanation for how it arrived there. Like, how did we get here?
Yeah.
They couldn't do it. But Van Leeuwen came with receipts. They had competitor research. They had 7 different concepts that they tried. They had rejected directions that they went down and did not work. They had design briefs and presentations. They had successive iterations. They had years of building consumer recognition. So when they had to look at the bare facts, Van Leeuwen came out on top. And this is really important because I think we treat our ugly drafts like evidence we should destroy. And in this case, those drafts became evidence of legitimacy. Van Leeuwen didn't win because it worked harder. It won because it could connect the finished design to a traceable series of original decisions. And that's why I want to bring it back to the AI connection in our work and our daily work. AI makes polished output cheap. And polish can now appear before like the thought is even done, right? You're just talking to the AI and then bam, 20-page proposal. Woo! And this does so many things. One, it creates fatigue for everyone that you're working with, or even yourself, because things are being produced so quickly. But more deeper than that is distrust. A finished report doesn't review who developed the argument, which sources were verified, what was rejected, whether the employee exercised judgment. This concern is bigger than one ice cream lawsuit. The EU AI Act now requires providers to make certain AI-generated or manipulated outputs detectable in a machine-readable format, with visible disclosure required in particular situations. But a machine-readable marker can only tell us that AI touched the work. It cannot explain that the human contributed. And this is not to say that the ice cream incident was AI. It's to say that trust is becoming more and more for currency. A watermark can identify the tool, but it cannot establish your judgments. So if we go back to the thinking trail, I think these are 4 things to think through. The first one is origin. What existed before AI? This is important because you have to keep those receipts. Because if anyone ever comes for you, if anyone ever tries to take an idea or say that you didn't come up with this, you want to be able to say, yes, I did. And the way you can do that is by showing maybe your voice note, voicing your observation, sketching your first draft, writing your first draft. There's a lot of advice out there that says use AI to help you unblock your thought process. And I disagree with this wholeheartedly. AI should not be your first draft. You should be your first draft. I know the first version is messy, but those first thoughts are where you develop your stance. If you give an AI, if you give AI an idea before you know what you think, it will fill in the blanks, and you may not even know which blanks it filled. Always document what existed before the AI touched it. Have a file that talks through it. Also, speak up in meetings. Make it visible in the real world. Make it legible in the real world so people can be like, it doesn't have to be perfect the first time, but at least plants that seed. So if anything comes out later, they know that my brain did that. The second one is inputs. What sources did you come in here? People and existing work informed you? What actually informed your work? Right? This is where you need to cite. Don't just copy, paste, and then call it a day. No, cite your work. Where did your sources come from? You need to go check them, especially if you're using AI to do the research. You have to check that resource before you paste it in. What people did you consult with? Was there any existing work that informed what you just did? Not this only gives you credibility, but it also makes you collaborative. And those are 2 things that are really important right now. It also makes you curious. Then iterations. That's the third one. What change failed or was rejected? What did you change? What failed? What did you just plain out say, we're not going to use this anymore? It shows your thinking. It shows your evolution of what was happening. Number 4 is judgment. What did you verify? What did you end up rewriting? What did you choose or add to whatever the AI spit out? Now, some of this you can write in documents. Some of it, when you're presenting your work, you can say, and this is really important because, again, so many people, so many businesses are asking us to use AI, but they also want the authenticity. They also want your experience, your zhuzh, right? And if they want that and you want to show that, you have to show both ends. You have to show the end product. You have to show how you brought AI into the party. You have to show how AI made the party better, but also how you are the main character, how you are the business. Okay? You have to still show that. Otherwise, and it just, 1, it makes it easier to be replaceable. And then 2, it undercuts your own work. So for example, this episode began with my voice note about this ice cream lawsuit. And I was like, wow, isn't this kind of crazy? And then as I was thinking through it, I was like, this is crazy to me because the news story, as I mentioned earlier, is connected in 3 different news stories, all about really plagiarizing copycats. And that led me to this rabbit hole. And then I was like, oh, let me validate this. So the AI, when I was talking through this, was like, okay, well, these are the things that are real. This is what the actual EU Act says. Here's the link, go read it. And this is what's not real. Well, also even the same thing for the ice cream. It was just kind of like, no, they were not ordered to give this. Rebel hasn't paid Van Leeuwen yet, but this was what the court came down on. But right now it's an appeal. So if I said that they paid it, then I would be wrong, right? So helping me with that fact checking and then send me the actual article links, I can go read that. This is where I think organizations and humans trying to navigate AI adoption are kind of having a moment. As employers demand more AI use and faster production, employees are interpreting that as devaluing their expertise. You might feel that way, right? Depending on where you are in the job chain, either you're like, wait, what's happening with my job and my expertise? Or maybe if you're in leadership, you're like, this needs to be used because that's what everyone in the economy is using right now. So with that, always think about how do you share why you made the recommendation, what evidence supports it, what AI accelerated, and what required human expertise. Because ultimately, AI adoption should make expertise more visible and not make you and your expertise disappear. Van Leeuwen had more than a finished pint. Van Leeuwen had a history, and it had receipts of how it got there. Research, rejected ideas, iteration, decision, years of building recognition. As AI makes it easier for all of us to create polished work, those receipts will matter more and more. So keep the ugly voice note, keep the first draft, keep the research and the version that didn't work. And then also record what AI contributed, what you rejected, and what you could have had added to this process. Because the final product shows people what you made, but your thinking trail shows them why it's still yours. Because ultimately, AI should not erase evidence that you existed before the final draft. So in the words of one of my favorite authors, Austin Kleon, yes, steal like an artist, but please, baby girl, keep the sketches. Think about the last time you made something. Think about the last thing you created with AI. If someone asked you to prove which part began with you, what evidence, think about the last thing that you created with AI. If someone asked you to prove which part began with you, what evidence could you actually show them?